Welcome to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, and I am back in the Sunflower House for a new episode, a timely one, about getting back to school for children and kids of all ages. And I remember this time of year when I was a young mother. It was so much fun to have summer break and swim and have more free time and not be constricted by the school schedule. But it was a little bit of a relief when late August rolled around and we were getting back to the school schedule. So, this can be a very exciting time for the little ones going to preschool for the very first time, or kindergartners starting elementary school, maybe riding a bus for the first time, and new middle schoolers where they might experience having to figure out how to do lockers and switch class on time for the very first time. I remember when my middle son Emerson was still in elementary school, but he took violin lessons and I would have to take him in early to middle school. And he was looking all around at the kids walking fast, talking so much taller than he was, opening their lockers. It can be kind of an intimidating experience. And high schoolers, this can be a big transition for many children and young budding adults as they prepare themselves academically for what may lay ahead after graduation. And for those going off to college and getting a taste of adulthood, that's a big, big, big transition. It was always kind of a family tradition for us to always take pictures on the first day of school. And the first day of our oldest son Stetson's senior year, where we had all three sons, two were going off to high school, one to middle school. And our middle son, Emerson, remarked, "This is the beginning of the end," which is really not an end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. And for those of you who have already put your children off to school and they've grown, then it's for the next generation, the grandchildren, or maybe neighborhood children, or maybe nieces and nephews that you're helping. Our retired nurse Lily helps get a relative on the bus for the parents. And sometimes this time of year is also for adults who are going back to school, perhaps to finish off that degree they've always dreamed of, maybe to get extra training. And even retirees who want to learn more are taking college classes. And when we interviewed retired nurse Lily, she talked about some of the interesting classes that she was taking, because learning at all ages is good for the brain. So we have a lot of information on speakingofwomenshealth.com. And if you don't already have our website bookmarked, bookmark it. And this is just a sampling of some of the information we have about preparing to go back to school and how to prepare children for the new school year. First of all, it's important to establish a regular bedtime. And summer activities with the longer days and the brighter evenings, sports, swimming, bonfires, can certainly affect a family's sleep schedule, as can summer travel, maybe to visit relatives. And sleep is very important for childhood growth and health. According to the Sleep Medicine Academy, children on average between the ages of 6 and 12 need 9 to 12 hours of sleep each night, while teens need between 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So it's important to start to get the children back on a regular sleep schedule before school begins. So maybe trying 10 minutes earlier each evening and starting the morning routine a little earlier. Now, my oldest son, who I've interviewed, earlier in this season, Dr. Stetson Thacker, on genetics. He's a scientist and a genomic medicine expert. He has kind of carped at me sometimes, Mother, if you would have enforced more sleep, I could have been a little smarter and a little taller. Oh my. Um, which is so funny because he's quite tall and he's quite smart. Oh boy. Um, so I just think that's kind of funny. And certainly there's big individual variations between people. But people, humans, children do grow when they're sleeping. That's when you have the pulses of growth hormone. That's why some children actually wake up with growing pains in their legs. So sometimes that might be a trick that they're going to grow faster if they get their sleep. So preparing for the morning the night before, I think is a good habit for everyone to do. Picking out clothing, packing lunches, having school bags packed the night before. This can really help reduce hectic mornings, especially, if everyone is heading off to work or activities. Heck, I still set my things out, pack my lunch the night before, pick out even my jewelry, my coat, or jacket, or any other accessories and things that I think I may need for the day. And growing children generally benefit from eating a healthy breakfast and having consistent morning routines and having enough time to brush their teeth and prepare for school and not have to rush and choke down their food before that bus comes. Talking to your child about the school day, it can be hard to sometimes find time for everyone to always be at the dinner table at the same time. But I think this is very important for growing children, at least several days a week, for the family to kind of sit down at the same time and catch up with everyone and what the activities of their days are. Certainly getting up to date with the sports physicals and any kind of medical requirements that might be needed. I think in the summertime, trying to have routine eye exams, routine dental checks, anything that can be kind of scheduled in advance is nice. I know that still to this day, in early August, I may go through an entire day of seeing patients that are all in the education field because those adults are smartly getting all of their health needs taken care of. And certainly, our boys and girls who are participating in school sports want to get in the game and be able to play and participate on their team. And many schools do require a pre participation physical exam. And certainly, cardiac problems, congenital problems are rare, but hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, if there's a family history of any genetic cardiac problems, or sudden cardiac death, or any heart murmurs, certainly before intense exertion, this should be checked out. Some higher intensity athletes may get a baseline EKG. And sports physicals are necessary to check for things like hernias and blood pressure and joint stability. And it's important because athletes may be required to get official medical clearance so that they can train and compete safely. And usually the physical is designed specifically to look for things that might affect an athlete's ability to compete, as well as what might be a safe level of activity. If there's an existing injury or a potential problem is identified during the sports exam, action may be taken to avoid future problems and to help rehabilitate an existing injury. We have a excellent sports medicine physician on our Cleveland Clinic staff, Dr. Caitlin Lewis, and I've been trying to get her booked for a interview. And during sports season, she's so busy. Hopefully, we'll be able to fit that in because there's a lot of advances in sports medicines, and many teams are fortunate to have a trainer, as well as, of course, their coach, as well as many times a team physician. Now, the extent of the physical exam varies between uh, physicians, but generally the goals of the exam are to look at the general health and the current fitness level, any existing current injuries or past injuries, any conditions that might impact the athlete's risk of injury, as well as an assessment of the overall level of physical maturity. So, when are usually these physicals completed? Well, there's no hard and fast rules when an athlete should have a participation physical, but usually it's required about 6 weeks before the start of a sports season. And this time allows uh, rehabilitation of an existing injury if needed, or certainly to improve conditioning to be able to participate in the activity. Now, proper conditioning is very important because it can help prevent future injuries. If the timing of the physical is right at the beginning of the season, there might not be enough time to address a condition or injury. And then the athlete might not be cleared to play. And generally, no athlete wants to sit out for the season. Although I have a funny story about my youngest son, Grayson, and he was always in the game. He even suited up one time so that we'd be allowed to play in a travel soccer team that I was coaching, a U10, and he was only 4, but he was a pretty tall 4-year-old. He lined up because you needed 10 players, and it was first communion weekend, and a lot of our players were going to be missing. And he was always one to want to get in the game. But I remember sometime in about mid high school, even though he was already playing varsity sports at a young high school age, when someone asked him what he wanted to be, he said he wanted it to be in the NBA and ride the bench. I'm like, why would you want to ride the bench? He said, because you get to see the game from the best vantage point. You're paid like an NBA player. And so, what if you're just back up in second string? You get to watch. Oh, I thought that was so funny. Um, So, who usually conducts sports physicals? It could be the athlete's own personal physician, pediatrician, family medicine doctor. It might be a trained uh, APP, like a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. Sometimes the school might set aside time for a visiting physician to conduct sports physicals on site. And in some cases, athletic trainers and physician assistants assist with the exams. And if you go see your own personal physician, then you're more likely to have a complete exam. Exams that are offered on site by the school are usually more limited, and they're generally not a substitute for having, of course, your own primary care physician. Now, when children go off to school, to college, or perhaps to boarding school, there may be medical release forms that need to be signed. In case of emergency, there needs to perhaps be medical records. There might need to be a complete physical exam, depending. Some dorms may have requirements. For instance, vaccination against meningococcal vaccine, simply because in crowded conditions like military barracks or college dorms, the meningococcal bacteria can spread rapidly. Certainly, there are medical, and personal exemptions depending on what a person's medical history is. And that's why it's always good, even for young, healthy people, to have a well established relationship with their primary care physician. And many pediatricians, especially if they're also trained in adolescent medicine, may follow these young adults going off to school or to the military, even up to age, 21 to 23. Now, young men should be checked for hernias and testicular cancer and should be taught to do a self testicular exam. And generally speaking, young women should be educated about when to obtain a pelvic examination. Most groups recommend a pelvic exam at about age 21 or 3 years after having started any type of sexual contact. But girls don't have to line up at age 18 like in the past. And we certainly don't do pap smears that early like we previously did. If you haven't listened to the podcast interview that I did with Dr. Sharon Sutherland on cervical cancer screening, which has really, in some groups, been increasing quite a bit. And some groups are falling through the cracks. And since women are getting their first PAP a little later, and some women are told to go every 5 years, which really may be too long for many women, I think that's a good podcast to go back to listen to. And you have been listening to the Speaking of Women's Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Holly Thacker, in the Sunflower House, talking all things back to school. And I think that the apple is kind of a symbol of going back to school. My children used to bring healthy apples to the teacher as a gift at the beginning of the school year. And we'll be talking about um, packing healthy snacks. Don't forget going to your dentist before going off to school, and have a plan for dental injuries and other health problems. Certainly, those athletes involved in contact sports many times will need mouth guards. That was always something my boys did at the beginning of every football season. So, talking about healthy eating. Sometimes in the summer, we might splurge a little and go to the ice cream parlor after a summer activity, or maybe, have some semi fast food at the ballpark. It's really a time at the beginning of the late summer, early fall, back to school to really make it a renewed commitment to healthy eating. In general, the Mediterranean diet has the most benefits. You want healthy proteins, and you want heart healthy fats and vegetables and colorful foods, fruits, citrus high in vitamin C, foods rich in zinc, adequate calcium, dairy, eggs, and really avoiding processed foods and the seed oils and gratuitous carbs and simple sugars. Both vitamin C and zinc are very important for warding off viruses and infection. So, on our Speaking of Women's Health site, we do have several healthy tips for packing healthy school lunches. So, these 8 tips. You want to assemble a healthy lunch. You start really with the protein source, and you want at least one serving of dairy. And then you may round things out with something crunchy to clean the teeth, fruits and vegetables. Um, Many children are able to buy milk at school, which is good, but you might want to also pack a water bottle and occasionally a treat for a special occasion. I think starting on Sunday night to plan out the meals for the family for the week, as well as the lunches, making sure you have the supplies that you need. Involving the child and consulting your child with what foods they like to eat and having a say in it. I made a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and to this day, my son Stetson's still upset that I would sprinkle wheat germ for fiber on the peanut butter. He did not like that. And even though he's a big fish lover now as an adult, he just did not enjoy tuna fish sandwiches, which I, of course, have always enjoyed. Now, many people have the opportunity to be able to buy school lunch. And This can be helpful if your child actually buys the school lunch as opposed to takes the money and just buys candy. When I volunteered at my children's school, I found out that some children were doing that and were allowed to do that. So, volunteering in school and taking a look at what foods they serve, if you're able to, might be a good idea. And it's important to eat at lunchtime because students who eat a third of their daily intake at lunch have much more energy to learn and stay alert and pay attention. And, because of the pandemic, so many children lost a lot of academic progress, and really making the most of the educational time is so important. One thing that I advocated for as a young parent was having recess first before lunch because I saw children line up so fast for recess because they had so much energy. They wanted to play and burn it. And they thought that if they hurried through their lunch and threw it in the trash and then lined up really quickly, that they would get outside faster, which isn't how it works. And finally, after my kids were already past that stage, um, and the research was in that that was a better way to do it. They did make that change. So always advocate for your children's learning environment. Now, fun food is certainly can be more appealing to young children. So occasional surprises with either a novel food or some unique presentation. They have so many cute lunch boxes and themes and things that might be comforting to your young child going off to school. When you grocery shop, generally the perimeters of the store is well, the better food is. The fresh fruits and vegetables, the low fat yogurt or cottage cheese, the lean proteins. One of the best is turkey and milk and eggs for hard boiling. And complex carbohydrates, particularly whole grain breads. And generally speaking, using extremely high calorie, sugar laden foods uh, for snacking after school is not uh, recommended. Simpler foods like milk, you know, ants on a log, peanut butter on celery sticks with some raisins on top, apple slices with peanut butter, fresh, maybe frozen fruit bars that you can make yourself can be fun treats. I used to throw different grapes in the freezer, and so those were kind of a cold treat um, that weren't ice cream, but still seemed to be quite enjoyed. And we have so many fun recipes on speaking of women's health and on our Pinterest page. Now, if your loved one is going away to boarding school or college or the military or going geographically very far away to study abroad, you need to plan for global realities. Obviously, going abroad requires a passport. Talking to your soon to be adult child about family values, behavior, safety, social customs, communicating your expectations regarding uh, subjects from money, drugs, alcohol use, risky behaviors is very important. Letting them know what your expectations are, setting the bar high, and keeping an open path of communication is very important. Now, if your child has any type of special needs, any anxiety, any learning disability, if they need an individualized educational plan, an IEP, you don't want to assume that the school knows everything. No matter what level and what age your child's at, it's very important to be strong, be healthy, be in charge, and be an advocate for your child. Also, celebrate little things. When your child um, completes that first day of school, particularly if they were so nervous and anxious about the first day, which many children are, especially if they're going to a new school. First time they read their own book, or that they get on the honor roll. Um, any type of achievements and advancements, it's nice to be able to document and discuss. Now, transitions into self confidence during the teen years. Unfortunately, we have a lot of increasing mental health issues in our youth. I think the social media, the lockdowns, there's been a lot that have been foisted on to the younger uh, generation. And certainly being aware of anxiety and depression and understanding that a regular schedule and good sleep and excellent nutrition, boosting that vitamin D, getting enough omega 3s, eating healthy foods and getting enough zinc, which you can go on our Speaking of Women's Health website to look for zinc rich foods. That can help mental health immensely, as well as regular exercise. And I think that the days of yesteryear where children were outside running around all the time, getting sunshine, boosting their vitamin D, playing, working things out amongst neighborhood kids, as opposed to being inside, connected to electronics, um, more isolated, I think led to better mental health. And so, be on the lookout. Certainly, if there's any signs of depression or anxiety or concerns about any kind of drug use or any kind of physical changes or appearance changes or changes in what you expect to be the gradual progression of social development and intellectual development, that should be a red flag. And even if the school's not noticing something, go with your gut feeling as a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver. And I think allowing your child to make some decisions and learning from failure, only making things so that it's easy or that every little activity gets a trophy, doesn't really help prepare children to be adults. Having a positive self image and being there to show love and affection, pointing out the things that your child does do correctly, not just the mistakes. But everybody needs constructive criticism as opposed to shaming or ridiculing, making decisions, taking responsibilities, being responsible, and being aware and focusing on one's strengths and talents and abilities, and trying to minimize what might be some natural weaknesses or deficits. And when disciplining your child, we want to primarily reinforce good behavior um, and not degrade or shame a person, but still have goals and expectations. Peer pressure. Years ago, my husband was at an event where a man was being honored and he had 8 children and they all were very, very successful. And my husband said, "What, is your secret? What advice do you have for me? I, just had my first child." And he said, "Control the peer group. They don't need a peer group," which I think was a little bit overboard and harsh, but that was, I think, a good point in that friends can be very important to development and socialization. And peer pressure can be potentially very positive, um, and being part of a team or activities. But peer activities and influence can also be a very negative influence, particularly the influence that's exerted in social media. And if it's prompting a child to grow up too fast, to do risky behaviors like smoking or drinking or drug use, or putting themselves in, unwanted and risky situations, that is more likely to occur when there's not adult awareness and supervision. So, having a good relationship with your child and having regular, honest communication, uh, helping them understand about peer pressure and how to negatively resist negative influences, and teaching your child how to be assertive, and giving reinforcement for that, um, for both male and female children. And you have to realize that your child's an individual and has their own unique personality. And I think giving choices, just like you do with toddlers, like if it doesn't really matter if they're wearing the blue sock or the red sock, I used to always um, say the second choice if I personally had a preference, but if they picked the first choice, that was fine as long as you gave them appropriate choices. Having some control and space in the environment is important. And so, as much as, of course, we want to protect our children forever, they are going to face difficult life choices. And we need to have a supportive community and environment to help them. Um, Many times, community groups, churches or mosques or synagogues or places of worship and community um, can provide some support, as can schools and community centers. Unfortunately, drug abuse is a very serious problem. The number of fentanyl overdoses in the United States is skyrocketed. It's very scary. The opiate epidemic, um, the drugs, even just uh, having giving your college aged student before they leave that you might have a headache and think your friend's giving you an Advil, but it could be laced with fentanyl and you could die. Or, oh, you're going to borrow one of your friends psychostimulants to stay up to study for a test. Well, that could be an illicit drug that could immediately kill you. These stories abound. Obviously, being a good role model, like yourself, if you smoke or drink heavily or use recreational drugs yourself, your child's so much more likely to imitate this behavior, which is very unhealthy. Get to know your children's friends. For years, my husband and I didn't go out together on Friday or Saturday nights because we were entertaining our children's friends and then girlfriends, or taking them out to eat with us. And so that was one way we dealt with things. I know my brother always had his children's friends over to water ski or do activities under his supervision. And certainly don't allow your underage children to go to parties without adult supervision. And encourage your child to get involved in extracurricular activities, whether it's sport or music or volunteer groups or a church group or a youth group. There's so many different opportunities for teens to socialize in a fun and safe environment and learn more about themselves. Certainly, if there's signs of depression or suicide or concern about your child's behavior, if you see sadness, withdrawal, lack of interest in food, or compulsive overeating, rapid fluctuations in weight, strange sleep patterns, withdrawal from friends and family, grades that drop, rebellious behavior, um, preoccupation with death and dying. These are all big red flags that need to be addressed with your healthcare team. And suicide is a serious problem within the teen population, and it can have um, some contagious type effects in communities. Sadly, adolescent suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth in the United States. Um, Contact your healthcare team. There's a 988 Lifeline network available 24/7 across the United States. The Lifeline is available for everyone. It's free and it's confidential. You can also text 988 to chat online rather than calling. So I hope you've enjoyed this back to school episode. Don't forget to eat your healthy apple and pack healthy foods. And I'd like to give a special shout out to one of our terrific sponsors who's been with us all along, Clever Crazes for Kids. It's a great online resource for children pre-K through 8th grade, and it provides STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics based games and activities, and they're all free. Not only do children learn from the website, but they can earn rewards and gifts like sneakers. Some of the kids in my school participated and won some terrific prizes. And you can sign up your child or your grandchild, or if you're an educator in the school, you can sign up your entire class. Just go to the website www.clevercrazes.com. And stay tuned to future episodes where we'll discuss additional ways to help deal with stress and anxiety. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Speaking of Women's Health. And if you have a question or a topic that you want to hear about, go to speakingofwomenshealth.com and complete our Contact Us form on the About link. And if you just might hear your question answered. If you don't already subscribe to our podcast, please subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on our Rumble channel or YouTube channel. And I'll see you next time in the Sunflower House.